plays my husband in this film, played by Hugh Grant.
For more than 40 years, Meryl Streep and Don Gummer looked like one of Hollywood's rare success stories. No endless tabloid battles. No public shouting matches. No dramatic courtroom war. Just a famous actress and an artist who built a family far away from the noise. But in 2023, the world learned something unexpected. The couple had actually been living separately for years, and suddenly one question was everywhere. What had really happened between them? Meryl Streep was not the kind of celebrity who turned her private life into entertainment. She rarely spoke about her marriage, her children, or the problems inside her home. That silence made the story even more mysterious. Because when a relationship lasts more than 4 decades, people naturally assume they know what it looks like. But they don't. And Meryl's marriage would prove that sometimes the biggest changes happen when nobody is watching. Before we get into what happened, think about this. If 2 people have spent most of their adult lives together, do you think love can slowly change without either person being the villain? Let me know what you think in the comments. To understand Meryl's story, we have to go back to a time when she was not yet the legendary actress the world knows today. In the 1970s, Meryl Streep was a young actress trying to find her place in New York. She had talent, ambition, and a future that seemed full of possibilities. Then something happened that changed her life completely. She fell deeply in love with actor John Cazale. Their relationship was intense and serious, but it was cut painfully short when Cazale was diagnosed with lung cancer. Meryl stayed by his side during his illness, even as her own career was beginning to grow. Then, in 1978, Cazale died. Meryl was only in her late 20s. She had lost the man she loved, and she was facing one of the darkest moments of her young life. But shortly afterward, another unexpected person entered her world. His name was Don Gummer. He was a sculptor, not an actor. He lived outside the center of Hollywood's attention. And unlike many people Meryl would meet in the years ahead, he did not need to become famous beside her. They married in 1978. And that decision would shape the next 4 decades of Meryl Streep's life. Because while the world watched her become a superstar, she and Gummer were building something much quieter. Something the public would barely see. But eventually, that quiet life would face a change nobody outside their family could fully understand. Meryl Streep's marriage to Don Gummer began during one of the most painful times of her life. In 1978, she was still grieving the death of John Cazale, the actor she had loved and cared for during his battle with cancer. Then, through her brother Harry, she met Don Gummer, a sculptor whose life was very different from the world Meryl was entering. They married on September 30th, 1978, only months after Cazale's death. Though, to outsiders, it may have seemed incredibly fast. But for Meryl, life was moving forward whether she was ready or not. And Gummer offered something Hollywood could not. He was an artist, but he was not chasing the spotlight. Their relationship could exist away from movie premieres, cameras, and constant attention. That privacy would become one of the most important parts of their story, because Meryl's career was about to explode. In the years that followed, she went from a promising young actress to one of the most respected performers in the world. The Deer Hunter helped establish her as a major film actress, and then came roles that would turn her into a legend, including Kramer vs. Kramer and Sophie's Choice, Biography. But while audiences were watching Meryl transform on screen, another transformation was happening at home. She and Don were building a family. They eventually had 4 children: Henry, Mamie, Grace, and Louisa. Though, for years, Meryl managed something that many celebrities struggle to do. She kept her family mostly away from the public drama surrounding her career. And there was another reason this marriage seemed so unusual. Meryl did not constantly talk about Don in interviews. She did not turn their relationship into a Hollywood brand. Yet when she won the Academy Award for The Iron Lady in 2012, she publicly thanked him, saying that what she valued most in their life together was something he had given her. Though, that moment seemed to confirm what fans already believed. After all those years, they were still together. But here is where the story becomes much more complicated. Because the marriage that looked intact from the outside had already entered a completely different chapter. By 2017, Meryl and Don had separated. And somehow, almost nobody knew. There was no huge public announcement, no dramatic interview, no social media war. They simply began living separate lives. For more than 6 years, that reality remained largely private. In fact, Meryl was still seen wearing her wedding ring even after the separation. EW.com. So what changed in 2017? That is the question fans wanted answered. But the truth is, neither Meryl nor Don publicly gave a detailed explanation for why they separated. And that silence matters, because it means we have to be careful with the rumors. There is no reliable evidence proving that one shocking act caused the separation, despite the sensational headlines that later appeared online. What we do know is far more interesting. After 45 years together, the couple chose to live apart while still saying they cared about each other. Their representative described it as choosing separate lives. Vanity Fair. And that raises a much bigger question. Can a marriage end without hatred? Meryl Streep's story suggests the answer may be yes. But the public would not discover this until years later, when a private decision suddenly became one of Hollywood's biggest relationship stories. And that is when the mystery really began. For decades, Meryl Streep seemed to have mastered something almost impossible in Hollywood, becoming more famous without allowing fame to completely take over her family life. Her career kept getting bigger. Her awards kept piling up. And yet, at home, she and Don Gummer tried to keep things ordinary. That became especially important as their family grew. They raised 4 children together, and Meryl often spoke about how important it was for her to be present as a mother, even while working on major films. But there was a hidden cost to that balance. Meryl's career required long periods away from home. Movies meant travel, demanding schedules, and sometimes months of intense work. Gummer, meanwhile, had his own career as a sculptor. 2 artists, 2 careers, 4 children, and 1 marriage trying to hold everything together. For years, it appeared to work. Meryl continued taking on powerful roles, winning awards, and becoming one of the most admired actresses of her generation. Yet she rarely treated her marriage like a Hollywood publicity tool. That privacy may have helped protect their family. But it also meant the public had almost no idea what was really happening inside the relationship. Then came 2012. Meryl won the Academy Award for Best Actress for The Iron Lady. During her acceptance speech, she thanked the people closest to her, including Don. To millions watching, it looked like another reminder that their marriage had survived everything. But years later, that moment would feel very different, because the marriage was not going to last forever. And this is where many online stories about Meryl Streep become misleading. Some headlines claim she suddenly divorced her husband after he did this. But there is no credible public evidence that one specific betrayal, scandal, or shocking act caused their separation. The facts are much quieter, and, in some ways, much sadder. Meryl and Don had separated by 2017, according to the couple's representative. Yet they did not immediately make a major public announcement. They continued living their lives separately while keeping the details private. People. That means the public spent years believing they were still simply a private married couple. Then, in 2023, the truth finally became widely known. And suddenly, people began looking backward. The old photographs, the awards, the interviews, the family appearances. Everyone wanted to know when the relationship had changed. But perhaps the most important detail was this. There was no public explosion, no famous cheating scandal, no ugly war between 2 celebrities, just 2 people who had spent most of their adult lives together and eventually chose different paths. And that decision tells us something important about Meryl Streep's private life. Sometimes relationships don't end because one person suddenly becomes the villain. Sometimes, after decades of shared memories, careers, children, and change, 2 people simply realize that the life they once built together no longer looks the same. But when the news finally became public, one question remained unanswered. Why did they wait so long to tell the world? And the answer would reveal just how determined Meryl Streep was to protect the boundary between her fame and her real life. The most surprising part of Meryl Streep and Don Gummer's story was not that they separated. It was how long the separation stayed hidden. By the time the public learned about it in 2023, they had reportedly been living apart since 2017. That meant 6 years had passed before the news became widely known. For a celebrity as famous as Meryl Streep, that is almost unheard of. Think about how closely Hollywood watches its biggest stars. A photograph, a missing wedding ring, a strange interview, almost anything can become a headline. Yet Meryl managed to keep one of the biggest changes in her personal life mostly out of the spotlight. And that tells us something about her. She had spent her entire career protecting one thing: privacy. While other stars made their relationships part of their public image, Meryl rarely did. Her marriage was not a television show. Her family was not a publicity campaign. It was simply her life. But then came the years of separation. Neither Meryl nor Gummer publicly explained exactly what caused the relationship to change. And that silence created a vacuum. Whenever a famous couple separates without giving the public a dramatic explanation, people naturally start filling in the blanks. Was there someone else? Was the pressure of Hollywood too much? Had they simply grown apart? Did their different careers pull them in separate directions? The truth is, we cannot honestly claim to know. And that is important because the real story does not need an invented scandal. There is already something deeply human here. A marriage can last 10 years, can last 20, can last 45, and even then life can change. Meryl and Don had entered marriage as young adults. By the time their separation became public, they had lived through decades of enormous change. 4 children, countless films, awards, aging, shifting careers, and a completely different world from the one they knew in 1978. The people who marry in their 20s are not always the same people they become in their 70s. That doesn't automatically mean someone failed. It can simply mean life moved. And perhaps that is why Meryl's story connected with so many people. Because underneath the Hollywood fame was something ordinary. A long relationship, family, years of memories, and eventually a difficult decision. But there was another detail that made the story even more complicated. Even after the separation became known, Meryl and Gummer did not publicly attack each other. In October 2023, Meryl's representative confirmed that they had been separated for more than 6 years and said they would always care for one another. That was a very different kind of Hollywood breakup. No revenge interview, no public accusations, no attempt to turn the other person into the villain.